The parachute was never found. Not the reserve, not the primary, not a single nylon panel snagged in a Douglas fir somewhere in the Cascades. What was found 9 years later was $5,800 in deteriorating 20s on the bank of the Columbia River, and a question that had long since stopped being about a hijacking and started being about something else entirely. Go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the investigation, the beginning of the man. Whoever boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland on the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, had done something that almost nobody in the history of American crime had done before. He had thought, with genuine precision, about what happens after. Not after the arrest, after the jump. Most people who attempt something audacious fail at the planning stage. They picture the prize and skip the mechanics. This man had done the mechanics. He knew the 797's tail stare could be deployed in flight. He knew the flight path. He knew the weather window. He had packed himself a $200,000 exit, and he intended to use it. The FBI gave him the name D.B. Cooper by accident, a clerical confusion with a different suspect named D.B., and the name stuck the way accidental names do. He had told the flight attendant his name was Dan Cooper. He was wearing a black suit, a white shirt, a plain black tie. He ordered a bourbon and soda. He paid for it. He passed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number. She dropped it in her purse without reading it. He leaned toward her and said, in words she would repeat dozens of times to investigators, that she should look at the note because he had a bomb. She looked at the note. The note described a device in his briefcase. He opened the briefcase briefly. She saw wires, red cylinders, a battery. She did not know, and would never know with certainty, whether any of it was real. He told her to sit beside him. He ordered her to convey his demands to the cockpit. $200,000 in negotiable 20s, 4 parachutes, a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. He was polite about it. He used the word negotiable correctly. The plane landed in Seattle. The FBI complied. All 36 passengers were released. The money was photographed, every serial number logged, and handed over in a canvas bank bag. The 4 parachutes were delivered, 2 of them operational, 2 of them training chutes with sealed, non-functional canopies. The FBI hoped he would not notice, or that he would choose a training chute and survive the jump long enough to be caught. He noticed. He asked a flight attendant which ones were the real chutes, and she pointed to them. He chose correctly. He told the crew to fly toward Mexico City at the lowest possible altitude and the slowest possible airspeed. The 727 climbed to 10,000 feet and flew south into Oregon, somewhere over the Lewis River, in wind and rain and darkness. With the cabin unpressurized and the temperature outside the plane sitting well below freezing, he strapped the money bag to his body, clipped on the parachute, lowered the rear stairs and jumped. He was 45 years old or thereabouts. He was wearing loafers and a business suit with no thermal layer. The terrain beneath him, the Cascades foothills in southwest Washington and the Columbia River Basin, is some of the most unforgiving wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. Dense second-growth timber, ravines, rivers running fast and cold in November. If you drop a man into that country at night with no survival gear and no map, you are probably not dropping a man so much as scheduling a discovery. The FBI searched the area for weeks. They found nothing. They searched again. Nothing. They brought in the army. Nothing. The wilderness refused to produce him, living or dead, and that silence became the case's most disorienting fact. A body, even a badly damaged one, leaves evidence. Bones, fabric, hardware from a parachute harness. The Cascades foothills produced none of it, and the absence started to feel like a statement. There is a theory, the most structurally satisfying one, that he simply died in the jump. The conditions were right for it. The temperature, the darkness, the terrain, the fact that he had apparently never made a parachute jump before. All of it pointed toward a man who believed he could survive something he could not. The FBI held this view for most of the investigation. A man that reckless in the execution after being that precise in the planning suggested someone who had run out of road and knew it. Someone for whom a $200,000 jump into the dark was preferable to whatever he was leaving behind. But precision is a hard thing to fake, and this man had been precise. He knew the 727. He knew which parachutes worked. He knew to demand negotiable bills. He asked for the money in a specific denomination because larger bills are harder to pass and smaller bills are heavier to carry. He had thought about weight. People who are running toward death do not think about the weight of their money. In the years that followed, more than 1,000 suspects were investigated. A man named Richard McCoy hijacked a 727 in Utah 4 months later using a nearly identical method and was immediately considered a strong candidate. He was eventually ruled out, though not without a fight from some investigators who found the parallel almost too clean to be coincidence. A man named Dwayne Weber told his wife on his deathbed that he was D.B. Cooper. DNA tests were inconclusive. A woman in Florida spent years presenting evidence that her uncle, L.D. Cooper, was the hijacker. The FBI tested a sample. It did not match the DNA profile recovered from the tie he left on the plane. The tie is worth pausing on. He left it in the seat, a black J.C. Penney clip-on tie, and when the FBI eventually had it analyzed using advanced microscopy, they found titanium particles on it. Pure titanium, a specific industrial grade not widely available to the general public in 1971. The kind of titanium present in aerospace manufacturing, in weapons systems production, in certain metallurgical operations tied to the Pacific Northwest defense industry. Whoever he was, he had worked somewhere that left titanium on his clothes. This is the part of the story where the question shifts. For years, the case was framed as a mystery about a man's fate. Did he survive? And if so, where did he go? That framing made for good television, but it was always the wrong question. The more unsettling question was never, where did he land, but who was he before he boarded? Because the answer to the second question determines whether the first one is even answerable. A drifter, a desperate man, a romantic amateur with good luck and a plausible bluff. Such a man lands in the trees and is found eventually. His money turns up, or his bones do, or someone who knew him talks. The woods don't hold that kind of person forever. But a man who spent a career learning which questions not to ask, who understood how institutions process information and where the gaps are, who had spent years operating in the space between what is authorized and what is possible. That kind of man does not leave titanium on his tie by accident. He leaves it there because it is genuinely there, because he worked in a place where it collected on everything. He understood compartmentalization. He understood how to move through a system and leave less trace than the system expects. The $5,800 found on the Columbia Riverbank in 1980 by an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram introduced a new problem into the tidy narrative of the man who died in the jump. The bills were deteriorated but identifiable. Their serial numbers matched the photographed ransom. They were bundled in rubber bands that had rotted away, the bills fanned out in the sediment of a sandbar. But here is the thing that the FBI never fully resolved. The bills were in sequence, still partially banded. If a man with a bag of loose cash had jumped into a river and drowned, the current would have scattered those bills across 100 miles of watershed over 9 years. They would not have been found together, in sequence, in a tight deposit on one sandbar. Which means they were placed there, or they were never carried to altitude in the first place, or something else happened to that bag between the jump and the river that has never been adequately explained. The FBI knew this. They did not publicize the implication with any force. The case was officially opened for more than 4 decades. In that time, The Bureau interviewed hundreds of people, collected DNA from a dozen serious suspects, tested fabric from the tie against industrial employee records, and cross-referenced the serial numbers with bank transactions in the Pacific, Northwest, Mexico, and Western Canada. None of it produced a conviction. None of it produced a body. None of it produced a single verified photograph of the man from after the plane landed in Portland. What the case produced, in the end, was a portrait of a particular kind of competence, the kind that is invisible until it isn't, the kind that moves through a world designed to catch exactly this sort of thing, and finds, without apparent effort, the place where the design has a seam. He walked onto a plane in a suit and a clip-on tie, and he took $200,000 from a government-adjacent institution at the height of its confidence. And then he stepped off the back of the plane into the dark over the state of Washington, and the dark simply kept him. The canvas bag was never found. The parachute was never found. The man was never found. Brian Ingram, the boy who found the bills, kept them. A federal court ruled he could. They are worth considerably more than their face value now, as objects, which is its own kind of commentary on what this story became and what the money meant to the person who took it. He did not need $200,000. A man who needed $200,000 does not plan the way this man planned. He needed to know that he could do it, that the system had a gap, and that he had found it, and that on one specific afternoon in November, he had walked through it, and the door had closed behind him, and no one had followed. The bills are in a museum now. The sky over the Lewis River looks exactly the same as it did that night. If you have a theory, the FBI's public submission records are still open. They always have been.